Katie here, and I want to demystify the Afterthought heel for you. I'm going to show you some of my tips and tricks that I use to make them fit just a little bit better. And when in the heck does it mean start it at your ankle bone? What does that mean? I'm going to show you. So hopefully we can make this a little clearer for you. We love Afterthought heels. They are a breeze to work up. You just throw lifelines in, work your whole sock as a tube essentially, pick them out, throw them on your needles, work them up at the end. But how do you do that exactly? It's where I'm here. It's where I come in. So most patterns will tell you if you are working toe up, you work until you reach your ankle bone, or A, cuff down, work down to your ankle bone. We all know what our ankle bone is. This little corner right here, this point, is what is going to sit on top of your ankle bone when you put your sock on. So when they say work up to the ankle bone or down to the ankle bone, that's what they mean. When you try your sock on, some of the top of the sock will be curving slightly up your ankle, or when you come down, some of it will be curving slightly down your foot. That is normal. When I first started knitting Afterthought heels, I did not understand that. I thought it had to be to the point before it started to curve up my ankle. And that is not the case. So, this entire bottom of your foot will fit the bottom of your foot. The top will slightly curve up or curve down, depending if it's cuff down or if it's toe up. But this is the point that will sit on top of your ankle bone when the sock is finished and on. That's where you're going to start your Afterthought heel. So I'm going to show you how I put my lifelines in, how I knit my extra row, how I pick it all out to put it back on my needles when my whole sock is done, and then how I tweak it just a little bit to get a better fit. So I am going to flip you around and we're going to get started. Okay, we have our sample sock here, and I am at the point where this sock will hit in the exact corner over my ankle bone. So I'm going to show you how we insert our lifelines to work our Afterthought heel later. Now, I prefer to work my socks over 2 circular needles split evenly. However, if you work at magic loop on just 1 or double points on 4, does not matter. This will still, we're going to be working with the top of our foot stitches, and then these are our heel stitches. So all you need to know is what stitches will hit the top of your foot and what will be designated for the heel. So any way you work this, and this is a toe up sock. If you're doing cuff down, does not matter. It's going to be the same exact process. All you need to do is know when. This little corner and this little corner will be over your ankle bones. So let's get started. The front stitches, which will be worked over your foot, will be worked in the pattern established. If it's just a plain sock, that's great. You just knit across. If you have a pattern like I do, you will work row 1 of the pattern or whatever row that you're on. So your first step, work the stitches that are going to be on the top of your foot and leg in the established pattern. Okay, now I have worked across the top of my foot, leg stitches in my established pattern. Now, flip this over. These are my heel stitches. These are the second half of my stitches, which are going to be for my established heel. Again, this is the same if you're working it across 2 circulars, magic loop, 1 circular, or double points. Doesn't matter. So what we're going to do now, we have our heel stitches here. We are going to knit all in our established attached working yarn. Okay, this is the yarn you're using for your sock at this point. We're going to knit all across these stitches. Okay, we've now knit across our heel stitches. The next step is going to be to take a piece of high contrast waste yarn to thread through as a lifeline our heel stitches we just knit. Now, when you cut your waste yarn, I recommend cutting at least 4 times the length you need. This will give you enough length on both sides that it's less likely to pull through accidentally. Don't want to lose our stitches. Thread your lifeline through your darning needle, and when you thread these through, make sure that if possible your stitches are on a cable. Gives you more room in here. Also make sure you do not cut and splice through the stitch. We want to thread your needle through the underside of the stitch. Now be careful when you start to pull it through. We want to leave a nice long tail. So I'm just going to pull this through and thread it through the rest of my stitches. Okay, now I have threaded my waste yarn, my high contrast waste yarn. That's very important so that you can see it. Through all of my heel stitches. I have even amounts on both sides. Now we'll flip my sock back over and work the foot/leg stitches in the established pattern until I get back to my heel stitches. Now, we are going to take I prefer to take a second high contrast color, cut a piece about 4 times the width of your established sock. We are going to knit this piece of waste yarn across our heel stitches. Do not carry your working yarn with this waste yarn. This is establishing your extra row that will be picked out later. So we have our heel waste yarn. This is our lifeline. This is our working yarn for our sock. And this is going to be the yarn for our extra row that will be picked out. So these are our heel stitches. We will just knit across in our second waste yarn. Now, a couple things to watch out for when we are adding our extra row in our contrast waste yarn is to make sure that you're not splicing your stitches. We don't want to accidentally pick up our waste yarn here, and we don't want to accidentally splice our actual sock stitches. What you're going to do, you have your waste yarn, you have your high contrast lifeline and your waste yarn for your sock, for your heel stitches. We're going to hold those to the back. You're going to take your established sock yarn and we're going to knit across these stitches that we just placed. Okay, now we've knit across these again, but this time with our actual sock yarn. Next step is to flip our sock back around and work the foot/leg stitches in the established pattern. This is we flipped our sock around, we're back to our heel. Now we're going to thread our second lifeline through our established heel stitches. I prefer to use the same color as my bottom lifeline. I do like to use 2 colors, and you're starting to see why. My lifelines, which are the stitches that will be picked up later, are in 1 color. And then the waste yarn for my extra row of stitches is in another color. So this teal one will be picked out. The one that is in pink will be picked up. Again, I recommend the waste yarn for your lifeline to be approximately 4 times as long. And when you thread it through, be sure not to pick up your extra row yarn. Be sure not to pick up or splice any of your stitches. Also, don't be sure to just accidentally pull it through. We don't want to do that. Totally defeats the purpose of placing it. So I'm going to place my second lifeline and then I'll check back in with you. Okay, I now have my second lifeline placed, which is a little hard to see because it blends in with my cable here. But we have one color for our lifelines. These are the stitches that will be picked up when we're ready to work our heel. Then we have another color for our extra row. These will be picked out to open our heel up. Now at this point, you work in your established pattern, either your foot or your leg, depending on if you're working cuff down or toe up. Then I will check back in and I will show you how I deconstruct all of this and pick it all out, and then some extra little tips for how to make it fit better. Okay, now we have worked the rest of our sock. And again, this does not matter if you're working the rest of your sock as your leg or your foot. It doesn't matter. Now we're going to see come into play. Remember how I told you to use your lifeline and your waste yarn in separate contrasting colors? Now you're going to really see why. I used my lifelines in pink. So these pink 2 rows are what's going to go back on my needles. And my teal is the extra row that I knit that's going to be picked out. So we have our nice closed up sock. The first thing we need to do is get our ends back out. So I already pulled these out of the corner. Be careful when you're doing this because you do not want to pull it out of the other side. Now that we have our ends out, what we're going to do is start at either end, doesn't matter. You're going to pick up and put back on your needles both of your lifeline stitches. And it does not matter if they're orientated the correct way. We can fix that as we work row 1 or before we work row 1. They just need to go back on the needles. When you're picking them up, be careful not to splice in your lifeline or drop back down and pick up through the back of your sock. So sort of pull, make sure your lifeline is snug. I put my finger under the back of it and I just float my needle through. So I am going to pick up, and before you pull this lifeline out, make sure you count twice. Just double check. Sometimes it can help to sort of stretch your sock out or put your finger underneath to press up, so to speak. But you can stretch it out a little bit to make it easier to pick up those stitches. So now I have my stitches off of my first waste yarn. I verified it. I can pull out the waste yarn. Now we're just left with our extra row and top lifeline. So now I'm going to go through and I'm going to pick up and put back on my needles my second set of stitches off of my lifeline. Okay, now I have my stitches picked up off of my second lifeline. I have double checked and counted. Now they are out. Now I am just left with that extra row that I knit in that second contrast color. This will be picked out. I already have all of my stitches and I've confirmed I have the correct number on the top and the bottom, so I don't have to worry about any being dropped. So you can just start at one end or the other, doesn't matter, and just pick this row out. And again, you don't have to worry about dropping any of your stitches because they are on your needles. You have confirmed you have the correct number on your needles. Now, if you run into a stitch like this, where when you were working your extra row to place this yarn, this waste yarn, you spliced in between. I'll try to get that in there. You spliced in between, so essentially you cut this waste yarn in half. You're going to need to be very careful and cut your waste yarn to get that free. That's why I told you in the beginning, be very, very careful not to do that. But if we do it, that's how we get rid of it. And it comes out and it's just fine. We have all of our heel stitches back on our needles. We have a big giant hole in our sock for our heel now. We have one more step to do before we can begin working our heel. If you just work a traditional Afterthought heel in the corners, do you see all this fabric? That can't be brought together without leaving a hole. So you're going to need to pick up 2 stitches in each corner to help take up some of that gap. These stitches will be taken care of with a decrease in the very first row of your heel that's worked. But what stitches do we pick up? So what you're going to need to do, we can easily see this stitch right here. He's going to be picked up for this side. So we have 1 stitch, but now I need this other stitch. You're looking for full stitches. You don't want to go through sidebars. Do you see here? There's a sidebar, there's a sidebar. Here's a stitch. This is what we want to pick up. So I have my 2 done here. I'm going to show you again over here. Okay, now on our other side, we have bar, bar with a stitch in the center. This is what we want to pick up. We want to avoid picking these bars up because they can leave a gaping hole. Whereas a stitch, you still have the bar in between and it's going to pull the whole fabric up. So that's one side. Bar, bar with this one. There we go, with our stitch in the middle. So you see the bar running through it, stitch in the middle. Put him on. So now I have 2 extra stitches on each needle. Again, those will be taken care of with decreases in your very first row. And now, if you look, you have next to no space. And you don't have to worry about pulling your working yarn super snug in your corners to try to get rid of those gaps or weaving in ends all over the place. At the end, you will be left with nice, clean corners. No gaps. I didn't close anything up. There's nothing there. So take care of the extra stitches with decreases on the first row and you'll be left with nice, clean edges. I want to thank you for joining me and seeing how I exactly pick up those lifelines and waste yarn to work an Afterthought heel. I always highly recommend using 2 different colors so you can clearly see. One color is going to be for your lifelines, which will go back on your needles, and the other color will be picked out. That is your extra row. Then I also showed you how to pick up those extra stitches in the corners rather than worrying about trying to pull your yarn too tight or weave in ends later to close holes. We don't like doing that. So if you liked this video, be sure to subscribe to my channel so you get notified when I post a new video, and be sure to check out my podcast. And I'm the Katie behind Katie DeGroff Knits. Check out all of my patterns and videos. And in the meantime, I'm going to get back to knitting.